we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. How does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before this lesson and what will come after it? Discuss the sequence of lessons that surround this one lesson.
Okay, so really the first thing that I did was I looked at their prior knowledge. So I went back in at the beginning of the year, we do assessments. And one of the portions of the assessment is on polymers. So I looked at the class as a whole on what they knew about polymers, and it was fairly evident that they didn't know much in terms of chemistry. In the initial part of the introduction of polymers, they were able to make some connections between polymers and biology class that they had last year. So it really started with getting an understanding of where they were in the past, which was, I would say, a low level of polymer understanding. So we started with that. We started with a real basic introduction of what polymers were, and we tried to bridge the gap between what they already knew and show how polymers connect between what they did in biology and what we're gonna work on in chemistry class. So we laid the foundation with a connection with the past, and then the previous class we really worked on vocabulary and what were some of the structural differences we were going to be examining. What can polymers look like? How are they different? And that's really where we laid the groundwork for today's class, where we were then going to investigate how those two things, the structure and the characteristics, combine together. Next class, we're going to continue this. We were only able to get through actually one of the groups. So tomorrow's class, we'll continue on with this. And then what we're going to do from there is we're going to take a look at some data that's already been established and compare it to what the students got. So they're going to evaluate their data compared to real data from scientists, and then try to reverse engineer, try to take a look at polymers and see, based upon the structure and the physical properties, what would the actual polymer look like at the atomic level, or at the molecular level. And then from there, we're gonna look at how these physical properties affect the lifespan of plastics, what happens to plastics after you're done with them, how are the physical properties used to recycle, how are the physical properties responsible for some of the issues that currently exist with polymers. And that'll be the unit.
Cool. Wow, I mean, it's a fascinating subject. Considering that we're just involved with that every single day of our lives.
Right.
All right. Is the text used in this lesson part of a sequence of texts designed to build skills and knowledge? If so, please give examples of other texts that form this sequence.
So I wrote this unit with another teacher, and really with the mindset of embedding text. And we looked at the types of text that can be used in science. And of course, there's traditional texts where they're going to read. But we also wanted to incorporate video. We wanted to incorporate molecular structures as text. We wanted to incorporate graphs, because a lot of science is done looking at graphs and data. So when we designed the unit, we wanted to try to hit as many of those different types of texts as possible. So today, we dealt with molecular structures as our text in conjunction with data that they collected, and how those two texts can combine together to form an opinion, to draw a conclusion. Tomorrow, we're going to look at graphs after we're done with the presentation. So we're going to look at graphs as our text, and can students interpret the graphs and use those graphs to draw conclusions, to make claims. And then beyond that, we're going to use more traditional text where they're going to read about recycling processes and watch a video as well. So we really planned this out so that we kind of hit a variety of different types of text for the students.
All right. So the third part is talk about the standards targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
So really the one standard that we were looking at is Common Core 1112.1, which is using text and then drawing, making claims based upon evidence. And that was really the focus of today. So we wanted to use the text, force them to use the text to really make a claim and support it with evidence. And I actually thought they did a good job doing that today, especially the evidence part. They really embraced that.
Seemed like it did. All right, so this one is, which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies and why?
Okay, so I thought this lesson really started with core action 1, when we're asking students to engage in writing and speaking and using evidence based on text. And at many points throughout the lesson, they were asked to go back and look at the text, go back and look at the molecules, go back and look at the data and use that and use the evidence from that to make a claim or draw a conclusion.
That's the second section here.
Yep.
We are interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your instruction. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Okay, so one of the first shifts is building knowledge through text. Traditionally in the past, I probably would have done more lecture on this, and they're not building their knowledge in that way. It's just me giving them the information and them writing it down. So they were forced to build their own knowledge. At no point did I actually give them the answer. They found the answers for themselves. So they used the text, the molecular structures and the data to actually create the knowledge. So that was the first shift, and I think that was probably the most important one. Is it okay that I do this?
No, it's totally fine.
Speaking, I asked them to speak. They were forced to speak to each other. They're going to be, in some cases they did. They spoke to the class, and everything that they said, I wanted them to come back to the evidence that they had. So everything was grounded in evidence from the text. And then the last one is the use of academic vocabulary. They had the vocabulary for the unit in front of them, and I encouraged them to go back and use it. And many times they want to just go back and use familiar words as opposed to using the scientific vocabulary. So I really tried to force them to use the terms, even though in some cases they were a little foreign to them. And I think as the lesson progressed, they got more and more comfortable with the terms.
So how did you teach this? How did you teach the content of this lesson or text prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
I would say in the past this was done with more traditional lecture. We would have a lecture, they would do some problems, and there would be a lab component, but this was very different. So this was a lot more hands-on than it has been in the past. And I think ultimately it's going to end up being a more meaningful experience for them as opposed to me just giving them information, right? Take the notes. It's more hands-on. They're involved. They were really into the lesson. I thought they were engaged. So I'm hoping that engagement results in better test scores and performance.
Absolutely. All right, third section. Student engagement is critical to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensure that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of this lesson. So how did you, so this one's always long. How did or do you support all students in working with grade level text? How do you create opportunities for students who are advanced to engage more deeply with grade level or above grade level text?
Okay, so the grouping for this was not an accident. The grouping was purposeful. Um, should we start that over?
Sure.
Okay. The grouping that occurred for this lesson was purposeful. When I selected the students to go into groups, I made sure that I had a strong student in each group, and I really took the students that I knew would struggle with the concept, and I really kind of put them, and I moved them around the room into a variety of groups. And what that did was that gave the weaker students the support of having the stronger students, and then the stronger students were able to teach a little bit more, and we know that by teaching something, we learn it better. So the grouping was important. I also, within the groups, divvied the responsibilities or the tests up based upon group strength. I know some of the experiments that they had to do were a little bit more challenging than others. And I knew that some of the students were very good in experimentation, while there are some of the others that were weaker. So I tried to match the groups up based upon their strengths, so that they all could really focus on the polymers as opposed to the experimentation. I did want the experimentation to be an important part, but I didn't want that to cloud the results. Beyond that, their presentations were done using the gradual release model, which is I do, we do, you do. So I supported the weaker students by actually allowing them to go first. So I did an example. They were able to see that, and then the we do part is where I really kind of helped them through the process. So I knew that first group that was presenting would be a little bit weaker and they might need a little bit of support. So I used that. They purposely went after me so that I can help them along the way. And then from this point forward with the remaining groups, now that they've seen it, I expect them to be a lot more independent.
How do you know that the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent questions and tasks with precision? Do students acquire the literacy skills addressed in this lesson? What did or do you do for the students who did not acquire the literacy skills addressed in this lesson?
Okay. There was a lot of repetition built into this lesson. I asked them to make claims at several times throughout while they were in their groups, working together, while they were evaluating other people's data and my own data that I presented. So there was a lot of opportunity for me to find out, were they getting it? Were they making the connection? Were they making a correct claim based upon the evidence that they had in front of them? So the fact that there were so many opportunities really allowed me to see where they were at. It was clear that some groups struggled a little bit more than others. Some groups were on immediately. Their claims were right on, and it matched the data, while others, it took a little bit longer. So the fact that I got to see it many times, I feel like I have a good idea right now of which groups need more help and which groups don't. And I think tomorrow, as this lesson continues and other groups continue to present, I can really focus in on the groups that were struggling with the concept. And the groups that were getting it, you know, they'll continue to get repetition and practice with it, so they should get stronger.
Home stretch now. Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? What actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Okay, so Core Action 3C is probably where I thought the strongest point in 3 was, which is providing students the opportunity to talk and communicate with each other and share their ideas based upon the evidence that they had. At many times throughout the lesson, I asked them to think individually and then share their ideas. They did it when they performed their Venn diagrams. They did it when they made their initial claim for their group, and then they did it again when they were watching other groups present. So there was really a lot of collaboration opportunities. Some groups collaborated a little bit better than others. But I think as they become more comfortable making these claims and seeing the connections between the molecular structure and the polymer characteristics, I expect more student input from everybody in the group.
The last two. Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve on. Reflecting on this lesson, what worked particularly well, and what might you do differently?
I was happy with the level of engagement. I thought the majority of the students were engaged. At some times, I noticed some students kind of checked out for a minute, and something I might change is the numbers of the groups. Groups of 4 can be difficult. When you have groups of 4, sometimes that one kid can be left off and not really forced to contribute. So I think if possible, I'd look into smaller grouping. In this case, I could have done that because I did have one extra activity, so I could have split the kids up, and that would have forced them to engage a little bit more in the lesson.
All right. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
I wouldn't say there's any surprises. I feel like I know my students well. Nothing that came up surprised me. Some things, that came up, I had some students come late. I wasn't happy about that, but really no surprises. The only surprise, I suppose, was they needed a little bit longer time with the initial parts. So, when I do this again, I might try to front load this a little bit more in the lesson prior, so that we can get this whole thing done in the course of one full period. Okay?
That was a great interview.
Thank you.
That was really good.
It's the spot.